Negro League's stats are now actually being honored by MLB starting today. So now Josh Gibson is now MLB's all-time career leader in batting average, slugging percentage, OPS. He's also the single-season leader in average, slugging percentage. I mean, I saw a lot of mixed emotions on Twitter and just different places where
last place I'd go when this news broke.
Oh yeah, no kidding, right? But a lot of mixed emotions of, well, the way I feel, and I'm sure I want to hear from you, but I feel as though it's long overdue. I'm glad it's happening, obviously. Yeah. But George, like, I grew up in a house where my parents, God bless them, I'm so thankful for it now, especially as an adult, and especially with the news of this. But my parents taught me about these players. My parents taught me about Josh Gibson. My parents taught me about Satchel Paige. I read books on it. They told me stories that were passed down to them from their parents who actually watched this stuff. So it is so refreshing now to see these players and their greatness acknowledged, because you know this. We've been covering baseball a long time in our careers in multiple cities, especially here. It's baseball capital of America. Baseball is about their numbers and their stats. It matters. Not that it doesn't matter in other sports, but my God, you hang your hat on the numbers in baseball. So this is major news that these players are now finally being acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. Especially when, for someone I've known about, and you've heard of it, like the Cool Papa Bells and Satchel Pages, of course. I've known about Josh Gibson, and what people don't know, because now he steps in, as you said, career and single season leader in all those hitting categories. People would refer to Josh Gibson as the Black Babe Ruth and Babe Ruth as the white Josh Gibson. And he did that while being a catcher, not playing as many games as major leaguers, because that's what the Negro Leagues back in the day. And you're just going to get a lot of people that are going to say, well, they didn't play Major League Baseball. The talent wasn't the same. The level of competition. At minimum, the Negro Leagues were equal to Major League Baseball. Sure. I'm not going to say it was better, but at minimum, it was equal. And think about after Jackie Robinson came into the league and he won National League MVP in 1949.
That's right.
Roy Campanella did it in 1951. He was a .332 batter in the Negro Leagues with a .906 OPS. Went on to win NL MVP 3 more times, as he did in 1953. Willie Mays in 1954, 2-time league MVP. Don Newcombe in 1955, NL MVP, had a .380 ERA in Negro Leagues, a .339 ERA his first 3 seasons in Major League Baseball, career .360 ERA for Newcombe. Hank Aaron, NL MVP in 57. Then Ernie Banks in 58 and 59. 11 of the first 14 National League MVPs after Jackie Robinson won his from 1949 on were black. Played in the Negro Leagues or were black athletes. So that shows what the level of competition is. And were they the best in the Negro Leagues? Yes.
Yes.
Were they the best in Major League Baseball when they integrated the league? Yes. So that's where people are going to try to break this down, cut it out and just take away what all those guys accomplished back in the day. And keep in mind, they were playing in the Negro Leagues because they weren't allowed to play in Major League Baseball.
That's right.
It wasn't their choosing.
It wasn't their talent.
Forcing. It wasn't It wasn't their talent, because they were more talented than guys in the Major Leagues, but they were forced to do it. And even think about, this is something where it's been worked on. This was years and years of research about Major League Baseball. When we do this, we have to have the numbers lined up and everything right. So when you drop them into the stats books, everything's accurate. Go back to Ted Williams, who Josh Gibson passed in some of these categories.
Ty Cobb, too.
When Ted Williams was inducted into the Hall of Fame, he said for Josh Gibson, I hope he is one day here, just given that the opportunity, given that ability, because at the time, the Hall of Fame was not integrated either. So you have someone that championed Negro League players and black athletes like Ted Williams saying they need to be recognized in the Hall of Fame as well. You can sure bet he'd be saying right now, he'd be fine with them passing him in the record books.
Yeah, I mean, listen, so you and I talk a lot about the numbers, and we just said, baseball's so numbers-driven. We've given out the numbers here and who these players are passing and what class they're in now in terms of the numbers. But that's why I kind of spoke to my upbringing and being taught this stuff and how appreciative I am of it now, especially as an adult. And I have kids of my own. Here's the deal. There's another element of this that I think isn't being talked about, but we'll see the return of investment for years and years and generations here. So again, I use my parents as an example of their parents watched, told them. My parents were smart enough to pass those stories down to me and give me books. And, I was into sports immediately as a kid, like since I came out of the womb, okay? So I was into this stuff. So I learned about the numbers and all that, but I heard the stories from hearsay from them, right? I think some of this is this new generation and generations beyond this one of you're going to learn about these players now because and I imagine you were the same as I was. As a kid, you're getting into sports, you're getting into baseball, you're learning the numbers, you're learning the players, you're reading about the stories. Now you're opened up to a whole new world that previous generations were not, unless you were taught that. Does that make sense? So now kids who are curious, who are loving sports, who are learning sports and learning about baseball and reading about the numbers, who's this guy? Oh, okay, let me read about him. Who's this guy? Let me read about him. Now you are opening the eyes of generations to come. That's only going to make baseball even better. More inclusive, yes, awesome. But overall, how often do we talk, and we've bashed baseball before, of not being able to really market players the right way or not being able to. I'm giving baseball a lot of credit in recent years. I think they're not great, but I think they're getting better at marketing players. I love the fact that they are way more flexible now with the game. They're changing the game. They're speeding it up. The pitch clock, this wouldn't have even been thought of or talked about 20, 25 years ago. They're implementing change. They're trying to do things to the game to make it more entertainable and to bring it into 2024 and beyond. This is another example of that. And I've bashed baseball over the years. I have to give credit where it's due sometimes too. And they deserve a lot of credit for this move and several moves that they've made in recent years. I love the fact that younger generations to come are going to learn about these players who, for the love of me, have not had and not seen the light of day. There's so many stories that haven't been told. There's so many players you had no idea who they are unless you were taught it. Now it's open for everyone to learn about.
I think it's important, too. You go to Major League Baseball's website. You go to stats. You
That's
go to
right.
all-time leaders. You see those names there, too.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's going to have kids
accessible.
looking up those names. Exactly.
It's accessible now.
It's not Major League Baseball, then you got to go to Negro League.
That's right.
Website. It's all right there for baseball fans. It'll grow the history of the game, and it'll grow the awareness of what these black athletes did to be trailblazers, of course, in the sport, but then also in a sport that's so rich with history and goes so far back, to have these guys and their names next to the all-time players in Major League history. And this is just baseball history as a whole. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, we talk about storylines for a living. This is what we do. But a lot of this stuff is just teaching even just the proper values. Like, think about this. A kid who's curious and learning about baseball and looking up some of these guys, he's going to read some of these stories from these Negro players and say, man, they had to overcome hatred. This is a story about resiliency. This is a story about never giving up. This is so I guess I look at it from a deeper perspective than just the numbers and just its effect on baseball. It's great, but it's deeper than that too, because they're learning life values and life lessons. In fact, I saw a tweet that I thought really summed everything up pretty well in terms of inclusion here. This is from Maggie Wiggin. Whatever you think about integrating Negro League and MLB records, the important part is that the world's worst people are crying about it.
Preach, Maggie. Preach all the way on that one. I agree.
Well said.